I found out my wife had another husband on a rainy Thursday afternoon, the kind of afternoon when the sky hangs low over the city and every sound feels muffled beneath the steady tapping of water against the windows. My name is Daniel Carter, and until that day, I believed I had a simple, ordinary, happy life. I had been married to my wife, Emily, for 4 years. We lived in a quiet neighborhood outside Portland, in a small white house with blue shutters, a garden she cared for every weekend, and a porch swing where we drank coffee on Sunday mornings. Emily worked as an event coordinator, which meant she traveled often, sometimes for 2 or 3 days, occasionally for an entire week. I never questioned it because she always returned with photographs of decorated halls, hotel rooms, flower arrangements, and conference stages. She would tell me funny stories about demanding clients and exhausted caterers, and I would listen while she rested her feet in my lap. I trusted her completely. That Thursday, she was supposedly in Seattle organizing a corporate dinner. I had taken the afternoon off because of a dentist appointment, but the appointment was canceled at the last minute. Instead of returning to work, I decided to surprise Emily by cleaning the house and preparing her favorite dinner for the following evening. While looking for candles in the cabinet beneath the stairs, I found a small black suitcase pushed behind a pile of winter blankets. I had never seen it before. At first, I assumed it contained old clothes or event supplies, but when I lifted it, something heavy shifted inside. The suitcase was locked with a 3-digit combination. I should have left it alone, but a strange uneasiness settled in my chest. Emily and I had never hidden things from each other. At least, that was what I believed. I tried her birthday, my birthday, and our anniversary. None worked. Then I remembered that she often used the last 3 digits of her childhood phone number for passwords. The lock clicked open. Inside were neatly folded clothes, a second mobile phone, a stack of cash, and several documents sealed in a plastic folder. My hands trembled as I pulled out the phone. It was switched off, but the battery still had power. When it turned on, the screen displayed a photograph of Emily standing beside a man I had never seen. He had his arm around her waist, and she was smiling with the same warm, private smile she used in our wedding photographs. 2 children stood in front of them, a boy of about 7 and a girl who looked 5. They appeared to be a family. I stared at the photograph for so long that the screen went dark. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Perhaps they were relatives. Perhaps the photograph came from an event. Perhaps the man was an old friend. Then messages began appearing as the phone connected to our wireless internet. "I miss you already," one message read. "The children keep asking when mommy is coming home." The sender's name was marked as Michael. Another message said, "Happy anniversary, my love. 10 years today. I still cannot believe how lucky I am to have you. 10 years. Emily and I had been married for 4. My stomach twisted so violently that I had to sit on the floor. I opened the plastic folder. Inside was a marriage certificate bearing Emily's full legal name and the name Michael Anderson. The marriage had taken place 10 years earlier in a town called Pine Ridge, nearly 3 hours away. There were copies of the children's birth certificates. Emily was listed as their mother. There were bank statements from a joint account shared by Emily and Michael, family photographs, school notices, and a lease agreement for a house on Maple Street. Everything was real. Everything was carefully organized. My wife was not merely having an affair. She had another husband, another home, and 2 children who called her mommy. For several minutes, I could not breathe properly. My ears rang, and the room seemed to tilt around me. Memories flashed through my mind, Emily canceling dinner because of a client emergency, Emily spending Christmas Eve at a conference, Emily insisting that her work required her to keep 2 separate calendars, Emily becoming nervous whenever I suggested joining her on a business trip. Every excuse I had accepted now revealed another layer of deception. I wanted to call her immediately, but something stopped me. If she had hidden an entire family for 4 years, she would be prepared to lie. I needed to see the truth with my own eyes. I photographed every document, returned everything to the suitcase, and placed it exactly where I had found it. Then I took the second phone and searched through the messages. Emily had told Michael she would return home that evening. She had told me she would remain in Seattle until Friday night. I found the address on Maple Street and drove there through the rain. The journey felt endless. My thoughts shifted between anger and disbelief. Part of me hoped the address would lead to an empty house. Another part already knew it would not. Maple Street was lined with tall trees and modest family homes. Number 18 was a pale yellow house with bicycles near the garage and children's drawings taped inside the front window. I parked across the street and waited. At 6:15, a dark SUV pulled into the driveway. Emily stepped out. She was not dressed in her usual professional clothing. She wore jeans, a green sweater, and the silver necklace I had given her on our 3rd anniversary. The front door opened, and the 2 children from the photograph ran outside. Emily dropped her bag and knelt to embrace them. Then Michael appeared. He kissed her on the lips, lifted her suitcase from the vehicle, and followed her inside. I felt something break within me. It was not only my trust. It was my understanding of my own life. I had become a stranger in my marriage without realizing it. I sat there for nearly an hour, watching shadows move behind the curtains. They ate dinner together. The little girl danced around the living room. Michael placed his hand on Emily's shoulder as she washed dishes. It looked peaceful, ordinary, loving. It looked exactly like the life I thought Emily and I shared. Eventually, I drove home. I did not sleep. I walked from room to room, staring at photographs of our wedding, vacations, birthdays, and quiet evenings. I wondered which moments had been real. Had she loved me at all? Was I only a convenient escape from her first marriage? Had Michael done something terrible that made her seek another life? No explanation seemed large enough to contain the truth. The next morning, Emily texted me from her secret phone without realizing I had seen it. On the phone I knew about, she sent a cheerful message saying the event had gone well and she would be home by 8. I replied, "Drive safely. I love you." My fingers shook as I typed the words. Then I called a lawyer. He advised me not to confront her until I had secured copies of the evidence. He explained that marrying me while still legally married to Michael could constitute bigamy, but the exact legal consequences would depend on whether her first marriage had ever been dissolved. I checked public records. There was no divorce. Emily had legally married me while already married to another man. That evening, I placed the marriage certificate, photographs, and printed messages on the dining table. I prepared no dinner. I turned off every light except the one above the table and waited. At 8:20, Emily entered the house, calling my name. She sounded relaxed. She carried a small bag of chocolates and said she had brought them from Seattle. When she walked into the dining room and saw the documents, she stopped. The color drained from her face. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she whispered, "Daniel, I can explain." I laughed, but the sound was hollow. "Can you explain the husband, the children, or the 10 years of marriage first?" She dropped the chocolates. Her hands began trembling. "Where did you find these?" "That is your first question?" I asked. "Not whether I am hurt? Not whether I deserve the truth?" She sat down slowly and covered her face. I remained standing because I was afraid that if I sat beside her, some old instinct might make me comfort her. Eventually, she began speaking. She said she had married Michael when she was 22. At first, they had been happy, but after the children were born, the marriage became cold. Michael controlled their finances and criticized everything she did. She wanted to leave but feared losing custody. During one of her work events, she met me. She said I made her feel seen, safe, and loved. What began as friendship became an affair, and when I proposed, she panicked. She claimed she intended to confess, but every time she tried, she became terrified that I would leave. So she created a second life instead. "You did not create a second life," I said. "You created 2 prisons, and you locked all of us inside them." Emily cried and insisted that she loved me. She said her relationship with Michael was only an arrangement for the children. I asked whether Michael knew about me. She shook her head. That answer hurt almost as much as the betrayal itself. Michael was not my enemy. He was another victim. Call him, I said. Emily looked up sharply. Daniel, please. Call your husband. You are my husband. No, I replied. I am the man you illegally married while your real husband was waiting for you at home. She begged me not to involve the children, but I told her the children had already been involved from the moment she used them as an excuse for lying. When she refused to call, I used the number from the second phone. Michael answered after 2 rings. I introduced myself and asked him to come to our address. Emily tried to take the phone, but I stepped away. Michael sounded confused and suspicious, yet something in my voice convinced him. 40 minutes later, he arrived. When he saw Emily standing in my living room, he froze. His expression changed from confusion to recognition, then horror. Who is this? He asked her. Emily could not answer. I told him everything. I showed him our wedding photographs and marriage certificate. He stared at them in silence. Then he looked at Emily and asked, "How long?" She whispered, 4 years. Michael stumbled backward as if struck. He did not shout or threaten me. Instead, he began crying. He said Emily had told him her work required constant travel. He had raised the children during her absences, believing she was sacrificing time with them to support the family. The 3 of us stood in the same room, connected by one woman's lies. Emily moved toward Michael, but he raised his hand and told her not to touch him. Then she turned toward me, and I stepped back as well. For the first time, she seemed to understand that she had lost both lives at once. Michael and I spoke privately in the kitchen. We compared dates and discovered that Emily had spent alternating holidays with us. When she claimed to be helping me care for my sick mother, she had been with Michael. When she told Michael she was attending a week-long conference, she had been on vacation with me. She had developed detailed schedules, false emails, and staged photographs to maintain the deception. Michael apologized to me, though he had done nothing wrong. I apologized to him for the same reason. Before leaving, he said he would take the children to his sister's house and contact an attorney. Emily remained seated in the living room after he left. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. She said she was sick, confused, and afraid. She asked for another chance. Which marriage do you want another chance with? I asked. She had no answer. I packed a bag and stayed at a hotel. The following weeks were filled with lawyers, police interviews, financial investigations, and painful conversations. My marriage was declared invalid because Emily had still been legally married to Michael. She faced criminal charges for bigamy and fraud. Michael filed for divorce and sought full custody of the children. I gave him every document I had. We remained in contact, not as friends exactly, but as 2 men trying to understand how we had both been deceived. Emily wrote me letters from her parents' house. In them, she insisted that her feelings for me had been real. Perhaps they were. That was the hardest truth to accept. A person can love you and still destroy you. Love without honesty is not safety. Love without respect becomes another form of selfishness. I sold the white house with the blue shutters because every room carried memories that no longer belonged to me. I moved into a small apartment near the river and began therapy. For months, I woke in the night wondering whether anyone could ever be trusted. I checked stories twice, searched for hidden meanings, and felt anxious whenever someone canceled plans. Healing did not arrive like a sudden sunrise. It came quietly, through ordinary moments, a meal with my brother, a long walk by the water, an evening when I laughed without forcing myself, a morning when I realized I had not dreamed about Emily. Nearly a year later, Michael invited me to his son's birthday party. I hesitated, but I went. The children did not know the full story. They only knew their mother had made serious mistakes and was living elsewhere. Michael introduced me as an old family friend. Watching him care for them, I understood that he and I had survived the same storm in different boats. Before I left, he thanked me for telling him the truth. I told him I wished I had never needed to. Today, 2 years have passed since I opened that black suitcase. I still think about the life I believed I had, but I no longer wish to return to it. It was beautiful only because I could not see the cracks beneath it. Emily took years from both families, but she did not take the rest of my life. I learned that betrayal can shatter your past without destroying your future. I learned that trusting someone is never foolish, abusing that trust is the true shame. Most importantly, I learned that the worst discovery of my life eventually became the beginning of an honest one. The day I found out my wife had another husband, I thought my life was ending. In reality, it was the first day I finally began living in the truth.